You know how I talked about The Vow a few weeks ago?
Was that the time traveling one?
No, so The Vow was the HBO documentary about Keith Raniere and his weird cult called NXIVM.
Of course, yes.
So The Vow took about 8 to 10 weeks to watch, and now there's another documentary about it, which is called Seduced. And Seduced is, I have to say, much juicier than The Vow. So The Vow was a true crime documentary series revolving around NXIVM and its leader Keith Raniere. So just if in case anyone's listening that's not quite familiar with him, he's a basically a very effective scammer who built his first businesses were MLM schemes, and out of that grew NXIVM, which he marketed as an executive success program. So it was a sort of methodology that allowed you to, I mean, he uses words like optimize your behavior, but basically be more successful, make more money through changes in worldview and changes in behavior. Now, what The Vow does is it does touch on the coercive nature of Raniere's practices and some elements of brainwashing and gaslighting. Like, the worst thing about it was the practice of branding they inflicted on the women members of the cult with a hot iron.
Yes, one said it was worse than childbirth.
You've been looking at it.
Well, I watched only, because after you mentioned it, I thought, oh, this sounds really crazy. So it came up because, I watch YouTube to procrasticate and it draws me in. When will I learn? But yeah, it was some YouTubers had covered it. It sounded pretty horrific stuff. Because I don't quite, but we've talked about cults before, so it made sense in line with what we've spoken about. Because I still don't really understand. I've never read a book on it even, so there's just so much I don't understand. It's just like, wow, and even the mindset of someone who would hold someone down to do that or coerce someone into doing something so horrific. And I still don't even know if the people in the inner circle were branded, because one thing to say, look, I did it, so bite on this piece of leather and suck it up. But I don't think they were branded. I think they just did that to the other women.
That's not made explicit. You're right. But this is why Seduced is so interesting. So The Vow, it was I think executive produced by Mark Vincenti, who was another ex-members. So maybe there was this sense that they want to, I'm not going to say it was a sanitized a view of NXIVM, but it was very much their atonement and their narrative of how things unfolded, whereas Seduced is more trashy. It's basically more explosive and more sensationalist. And that's when you're like, oh, this is really nuts. So it delves much deeper into the cultish practices of NXIVM, from the sleep deprivation to, as I said, like the all-night volleyball matches, which sound ridiculously funny, but actually it was a way of like grinding people down. And there's an interesting development in Seduced, because in the last few episodes of The Vow, one of the women that speaks is an actress who went to the first few workshops and classes and took her daughter with her. She's relatively well known because she's an actress, but she's also royalty. She's descendant from a royal family in Eastern European royal family.
Oh wow! Okay.
Royalty,
how am I saying wow? I don't believe in monarchy. What am I doing? Anyway, go ahead.
It's really by the by in the documentary though. But her daughter, called India, has joined the cult, so she takes her with her at an early masterclass with Keith Raniere, the mum, and then she's very quickly put off by all this, and she's like, this isn't right. I'm going to leave. But her daughter gets sucked in. You don't really know what the background is to that in The Vow, but what you do see is her trying to reach her daughter, because her daughter then refuses to speak to her. The Seduced, I assume, was shot after The Vow, because you see India, she's one of the protagonists. She speaks a lot, and she's left the cult, and she talks about her experience of NXIVM, and that's really interesting. She spent a hell of a lot of time there. She's joined when she was very young, And she was at the receiving end of the worst of it, of the sexual abuse, of the branding, of all the coercion. But yeah, so a lot of NXIVM in my life recently. And I think Seduced has more about the early days of Keith Raniere. And even then, you're like, how on earth did this man possess enough charisma to convince all these people to join him? I don't know.